Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon. So nice to see so many of you already connected. Hi, Roberto Franco. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you. Karen Farkas Marinazan. Who else? Denise. Charlotte. Judge Rocky Pollock. Awesome. Am I missing anybody? Just reading my... Debbie Pollock is here. Okay, Karen, you have a very interesting question about Jewish time. Jewish time by itself, like that. It's Jewish time is very interesting. Yeah, there is the popular belief that Jewish events always start late because people come late, and we call it Jewish time. And yeah, we make a fun and we make a joke out of it sometimes. But the concept of Jewish time goes beyond that. And the joke is because time in Judaism is always relative. And that is coming from the Talmud, not necessarily the Torah itself, although the Rabbi seems to find hints in the Torah, but the Talmud talks a lot about Jewish time and how time is relative in Judaism. Let me explain what I'm talking about. The way we calculate time in Judaism is you take the hours or the period of time what is how you say this, the daytime. Let's put it this way: we take all the hours of the daytime from sunrise to sunset, and then you divide that into 12 equal segments. Each one of those segments is called an hour. But it's not a 60-minute hours, because it depends that it's in the middle of the winter, it's in the summer. Let's say Winnipeg, for example, right? In the middle of the summer, when it's early, it's light really early, like 5 in the morning, sometimes even before that. And then it gets dark almost at 11 p.m. So you have to take all those hours of light and split it into 12 equal segments. So at the end of the day, you may actually have that every Jewish hour is 1.5 regular hour. And in the middle of the winter, it's all the opposite. Every Jewish hour might be 40 minutes of regular time. So that's the joke that we say that people are always late because we never know what an hour really means. Now, said that, I always like to start a timer at the time of the event. So yes, technically the class always starts 5 minutes late, but it's just the first 5 minutes so people will get around. You can use the chat, you can say hello, and yeah, so we can all be together by the time that I start with the first text. I hope that answers your question, Karen. You're very welcome. Shelly Chochinov is here. Sorry, I'm late. No, you're not late. You see, Shelly, I already had my cup of coffee while I was chatting with people before the class. That's a little trick. That's another reason why we have a timer. That's when you can have the coffee. Hello, John. Welcome. A little time to schmooze. Correct. That's the idea. A little time to schmooze. So then we don't schmooze as much during the class. So let's begin. Today we have Parsha Shlach Lecha, and this is a Parsha that I always remember, and let me explain why. It's because I always learned or studied in theory what make a scroll of Torah kosher or not, right? There are many details or many things that can render a Torah not kosher. The most common one is if one of the letters is missing for any reason. It's cracked, it's blurred, something happened, the letter is missing, it's not kosher. The entire scroll is not kosher because that single letter. Many years ago, I was a cantor in Santiago, in Chile. And we were having a bar mitzvah on a Thursday morning. We call it the tefillin ceremony. Right, with the bar mitzvah boy will wrap the tefillin for the first time in front of the entire congregation, and there is a little Torah reading there. And the kid was reading from the Torah, and he spat on the scroll. And it was this Parsha Shlach Lecha. And the word was Vayaturu. And they toured, because it's all about the spies that Moses sent to journey to report on the land of Israel. So he spat on the scroll, and one of the letters, and basically the letter disappeared. It was a big black mess. So the Torah immediately became not kosher anymore. And that's how I remember this Parsha, because that episode that happened, and it brought back all the memories of something that I studied in theory but I never experienced. So now I can actually say that I saw a non-kosher scroll of Torah, and actually I saw the exact moment when that Torah became not kosher. Yeah, a little story for all of you, something that actually happened to me. Hello, Judy. Welcome. So, as I mentioned, we are going to study about the spies. Not necessarily about the episode itself, when they went, and all that, because not about that, but what happened after. When these 12 spies that they were sent to explore the land of Israel came back to report what they saw, to report what they experienced there. Now, we have to remember that the whole idea of sending these 12 spies was to send one representative from each tribe, because of course they wouldn't trust each other, right? Of course, it would be much easier to send a couple of spies. They will come, they will report, and that's it. It's a much agile party that you can send. In fact, the Haftorah for this weekend is the episode when the next generation sent spies, and they sent only 2, because they learned from this week's Parsha the disaster of sending 12. And why they sent 12? Because they didn't trust each other. It's like I can see it sometimes when families want to immigrate to Canada. And you will see that usually it's not a single person that comes. Usually husband and wife or something like that. So they both will see it, because they want to be sure that they are actually reporting properly what they experience here in Canada. So they both come and they both actually look around to be sure that they're experiencing what Winnipeg has to offer. Well, back in the day, it was pretty much the same. Everybody wanted to be there. They didn't want to depend on somebody else's report. Okay? So they went, they experienced the land. When they came back, it wasn't unanimous, the report, but 10 of the 12 said, there is no way that we can make it. There is no way we can settle in that land. They are too powerful. We are too weak. We should go back to Egypt. But 2 of them, out of the 12, only 2, Yehoshua and Caleb. In English, you would say Joshua and Caleb. They said, are you nuts? What about all the miracles that we experience? Of course we can make it. We have to plan. We need a strategy. But we can make it. We can do it. Let's go. Well, as you can imagine, most people believed the negative report of the 10 and then disregarded the positive report of the 2. And I was realizing sometimes that life is not much different, right? We are usually more willing to accept a negative report than a positive report. For some reason, I don't know, I wish I could understand the psychology behind that. But it's easier to believe the bad news than the positive news. And that's exactly what happened there. They didn't care about the report of Joshua and Caleb, and then it was a big kerfuffle. They wanted to go back to Egypt. So let's go to that text And let's see what happened. Okay, so it goes like this. The entire assembly raised up and issued its voice. The people wept that night. All the children of Israel murmured against Moshe and Aaron, and the entire assembly said to them, "If only we have died in the land of Egypt. Why is Hashem bringing us to this land to die by the sword?" Whew. I don't know what you believe about that, but I would like to hear your opinions about this text, because it was a pretty sad moment, the history of the Israelite in the desert. They were almost there, almost to they're about to reach their destination. The whole idea of leaving Egypt was, number one, to receive the Torah, number two, to enter to the land of Israel. They have two goals. They already achieved one. They received the Torah, and even then, it wasn't as smooth as we believe it is. That's why on Shavuot we stay up all night, right? Because even that night, the rabbi said they fell asleep. They were late for the date with God. They were late for that intense and a unique date with God when they will experience revelation. They were late. It wasn't as smooth. But now, when they were about to fulfill the second part of the promise, they kind of failed. And in a big way. Let's see. Debbie Pollack, you said the Jews had no faith in God. They were not yet elevated spiritually. Interesting. Then Denise, you said people always think the grass is greener on the other side. Yeah, this is very interesting, because they were about to enter to so they could have experienced that the grass was greener in the land of Israel. But no, they thought it was in Egypt. Karen, you said, didn't they complain the whole way? It's just typical. Have you ever been to a synagogue meeting? Yeah. But that's what I was saying, right? That we always seems to be fast to embrace the negative. Sometimes we struggle to see the positive in many ways. But this was a low that it was very, very low, because it wasn't just like saying, let's go back to Egypt. I read this and I get moved actually by the language when I said that they wept that night. That's big to say that they wept the entire night. Whew. In fact, there is a midrash that God basically got very angry. And according to the midrash, this episode when they wept was on the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, which is Tisha B'Av, which is the day that the temples were destroyed. I don't know if you remember that. It's going to be pretty soon. In July, we have Tisha B'Av. Usually people don't experience Tisha B'Av. It's in the middle of the summer. People are at the lake. So it's not the most popular observance in the synagogue. But nevertheless, I think it's very important. The Midrash said that this happened on Tisha B'Av because God basically said to the people of Israel, because you have cried without a reason, I will give you a reason to cry. I know, it sounds to us like it's bad parenting, right? It's like, I don't know. But it used to be a very common, I hope I'm talking about past tense and nobody uses this anymore. But it used to be the way parents used to educate their kids. Keep crying and I will give you a reason to cry. Have you ever heard that? I hope not. But it was very common to talk the kids that way. If you keep crying, I will give you a real reason to cry. So this pretty much seems the way it is. Almost like You said, Clyde says, the 10 were partially right because we ended up being kicked out after the second temple. Why do you say that? Why do we say that they were right? Right about what? That's an interesting question, right? Denise, you said, as Jews, we always question. They regret a decision because... Debbie, you said God was very angry because the Jews did not trust him. Yeah. Not to go in. Well, they eventually they went in, right? 40 years later, finally they went in, and according to the biblical narrative, every time that they remained faithful to God, things were pretty good. Problems started to be when eventually things went to the other side, and they incorporated idolatry to the temple and so forth. And so forth. So let's read a few things that happen here, because I read this and my question is, how could that happen? Have you ever wondered yourself, when we read these stories, how could that happen? Because I've talked with many people about the biblical stories, and it seems to be kind of an understanding, or people will say, hey, if I will be part of that generation, there is no way that I will make the mistakes that this guy made. When you live in a time where miracles are as explicit as they could be, because in this generation, you may be a person who actually believes in miracles. But correct me if I'm wrong. You will most likely struggle to try to convince other people to see the miracle that you experience. It seems that we always have a rational explanation and so forth, because the miracles in this generation are not necessarily as explicit or as evident as the kind of miracles that we read in the Torah. I haven't experienced in this generation actually a sea that will split so an entire nation of hundreds of thousands of people can cross to the other side. We don't see stuff like that. We don't see manna falling from heaven. So we do experience miracles, but not in the same way. According to the Torah, we live in times where God is hidden. So we have to actually push yourself to the limit to actually being able to see God. But living in those days, when everything was explicit, the presence of God was there, miracles that you cannot argue, you cannot challenge. The miracles were a fact. And they still do this. How is that possible? How is that possible? Judge Pollack, let's see what you have to say. I'm interested. I'm intrigued. You said God sure expected a lot from Iraq. That bunch of immigrants who really didn't know where they were going and were poorly equipped to appreciate spiritual leadership. Okay, it's very interesting. Very interesting. Because let me tell you something, and I'm going to show it to you in a minute, that there are actually opinions about how effective miracles are to help us to believe in God. Right? Let me explain what I'm talking about here. This is the text from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. By the way, if you don't know this guy, he was a rabbi and a thinker and a halachic expert in North America on the 20th century. So he said this: there is a great difference between individuals who have developed a faith in and loyalty to God through labor and toil, and those who experience an epiphany through miracles and wonders. The generation of the wilderness gained their awareness of God through the miracles that they witnessed over the prior 2 years. Although this generation had the greatest awareness of the Creator in the history of the world, they were accustomed to believe only in that which their eyes saw. since they had only seen supernatural miracles, but had not yet observed God's providence manifest in nature, such as his intervention to assure victory in battle and conquest. They will not fathom this type of miracle. Without supernatural intervention, they will have to engage in a war that they would not naturally win. Since their faith was rooted in God's obvious wonders, they lacked a developed awareness of God and the spiritual world, maintaining an attitude of, I'll believe it when I see it. The generation believed because they did actually see wonders, but they had not been trained to use their intellectual faculties and rational thought, to have faith even before any sign of assistance or respite were apparent. I think this is very interesting. So basically what Rabbi Feinstein is saying here is that there are two ways to believe in God. Number one, you experience a miracle, then you believe. Number two, you didn't necessarily experience a miracle, but yet you discover God by being guided into discovering where God is and how God operates in the world. It's almost like you were mentored into believing in God. I believe what Rabbi Moshe Feinstein is saying here in a nutshell is that this generation, the generation of the spies, didn't believe because they didn't go to yeshiva. That is what he's saying, basically. They never went to yeshiva. So that's why their faith was incomplete. Yes, they have the miracles, but most of the time, the miracles by themselves don't work. It's almost like easy come, easy goes. They didn't do anything for the miracles. The miracles were just there. There was nothing they had to do. But when you go to yeshiva, when you study Torah, then you have to get engaged into that activity and you have to process the information. And with that, you have to struggle with your faith. And by engaging in that struggle, your faith at the end is going to be stronger than just believing because you experience the miracles. That is, I believe, what Moshe Feinstein is trying to say. Shelley, what you said here? Let me see. It says, something having changed. We still don't like being told what to do and when to do it or not. Well, I think it's beyond being told what to do. It's I think we are talking about the concept of emunah, of faith, in the sense that most of the time we don't know what to do. Yes, there is the halachic concept that you know what to do in the morning. You have to wake up and pray to God, put on tefillin, read Torah, so forth. That part is very clear. But life is much more than that. And most of the time, we don't know what to do. We all have expectations and we all have things that we want. But what do you really have to do to achieve that? We don't know. We can guess. But there are so many aspects that they escape from our control that we don't know. We don't know what to do. And that can generate lots of stress and lots of anxiety. And I'm pretty sure the people of Israel, when they were in the border of the promised land, their level of anxiety was ridiculous. How is that possible? Because they didn't develop a true faith. Faith in the sense that you will always keep moving forward, believing that if there is a plan and you're part of God's plan, you're going to get what you need. Not what you want, but what you need when you need it. That is the concept. That is to actually reach a level when you can feel that from the inside. It takes time. Because otherwise, sometimes the source of anxiety is the fear that you're not going to get what you need when you need it. And it's and I believe that's one of the sources of anxiety. Yeah. Let's see if I have any more comments here. By your own initiative, you said, Debbie. Debbie Pollux said, it was a belief in God as only creator. They did not understand God's essence. Today, by our actions, we need to uncover God's essence without open miracles. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Yeah. Judge Pollack, this is an essential lesson. I believe so. I believe this is something that it's important. It's important, but it takes a lifetime. It's a lifetime journey to reach that level, and sometimes we never reach it. And I believe sometimes it depends on what kind of guidance we have to be there. Denise, you said, let's see. God was trying to tell the Israelites that faith is important. Also, God was trying to impart effort on their part to accept the path their own and work with it. Yeah, I don't know if you noticed that as they were getting closer to the promised land, it's almost like God was withholding divine providence, at least in an explicit way, little by little. And there is actually a midrash that it will say that one of the reasons why they wanted to go back to Egypt, or let's put it this way, it's not that they wanted to go back to Egypt, that they didn't want to enter to the promised land, is because they knew that at the time that the end won't have this magical cloud or this pillar of fire. All that is going to be gone. Remember, the cloud of glory and the pillar, that column of fire that they have every day, was an explicit reminder of the presence of God. Once they entered to the promised land, that was gone. Now there is another explanation that is blaming from all this scheme to try to scare people to go back to Egypt, that it was organized by the leaders of the tribes, that they had a special position in the desert, but they were afraid that they were going to lose that status once they entered to the promised land, and then you will have other kind of organic statuses that they are going to be created, in the sense that it's not going to be so much about who is the prince of each tribe anymore, but then it was going to start being something like, well, I'm a farmer, maybe I'm more successful than you, and now I have a different status without the tribe or within the Israelites, and so forth. So many fears, and all these people that they felt threatened, but this new reality, for one reason or another, they didn't want to enter to the promised land. So there are more theories about it. It's not everything is about the faith in God, but it seems to be also some more practical reasoning of why some people didn't want to actually enter to the promised land. Who else is here? Let's see, Dariga Aydarkanova. Did I say that right? Welcome to the class. Welcome to the class. Anyway. Okay, so let's continue with the next text. Let's go back to the topic of believing in God, especially in these days where we don't have those magic signs that they did have in the desert. It's almost like it was a progression, because in the desert they have these explicit miracles. Once they enter to the promised land, we still have some accounts of explicit miracles, but once the temple was destroyed, that was the time where we even lost that little bit of explicit connection with God. So, Rabbi Victor Miller says, gaining a strong and authentic trust in God takes a lifetime of effort. Yeah, what did I tell you? Lifetime. It's a lifetime journey. One must invest much time and effort contemplating the design and complexity evident in creation. the laws of the Torah and its prophecies, and accurate historical events on the world level and individual level. Very interesting. It said, before you even start studying everything, look around. Take the time, explore the world. And I believe that's the way we all start. We all start by building or creating some kind of structure in our head. We try to, by observation, try to understand how the world operates, right? And that's fine. Judaism does not embrace blind faith and a mere utterance of "I believe." There must be honest and careful study of the facts that result in an informed decision and a developed understanding of our Creator. Yeah, so basically, you should start by getting an opinion. What's going on? Then you study, then you compare, then you analyze. And that's why then you will be closer to one rabbi or another rabbi. They won't find this interesting. And I don't believe that much. It's dynamic. That's why it takes a lifetime to develop this. So if you are not there right now, if you struggle with faith, if you struggle to understand God, you're not alone. We're all there because it changes all the time. Sometimes it depends on what we study today, that it may change our perception of God. And that's okay. That's okay. Hi, Gloria. Welcome. And Debbie, you said God wants us to partner with Him in uncovering holiness in this world and not just by obvious input. Yeah, we all should feel that we are partners with God. That's very important. Now, let's continue with another text from this week's Parsha. And this is very interesting, and I purposely picked these verses today because I'm talking to people who are struggling. Maybe you are one of those that you feel that you have an understanding of God. But sometimes and I feel it all the time, that I hit a wall where I'm trying to live a life of faith in a world that sometimes is in a rush to believe the bad news, the negative report. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Parsha is almost like showing this 10 against 2, because I believe that the world in general never changes. It's always 10 against 2. And it's very difficult for those 2 to remain strong in front of the 10. Don't forget that when God picked Joshua to be the next leader after Moses, and remember, Joshua was one of the 2 spies that came back with the positive report, right? When the name was Hoshea, and God changed his name, Yehoshua, God will save you. In the sense that God added God's name to the name Hoshea. It's almost like naturally he will struggle and he will find difficult to remain strong. So God had to add a little bit of strength from above, so Joshua will remain strong in his faith. From here, the rabbis explain that sometimes we have to pray to God to bless us with faith, with emunah. It's not automatic. If you feel that you are struggling to strengthen your faith, the first thing you have to do is to pray for faith. Because once you get that, once you're blessed with faith, then everything is going to be easier. If you can see the world with the eyes of a person of faith, everything will go much smoother. The problem is we are not there. We struggle to function that way. So one of the good things to ask God for is to be blessed with faith, with emunah. Yeah. You said, Debbie, just one mitzvah can change the scales. Yeah, that's correct. So let's go to this text. So Caleb hushed the people before Moses and said, let us by all means go up, and we shall gain possession of it, for we shall surely overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we cannot attack that people, for it is stronger than we. Now, this is what I mean when I said that I brought this text to speak to everybody who is struggling on living a life of faith, because we feel that whatever we do has no impact in other people and so forth. Well, this text says that not exactly like that. Let me explain. And I will bring an opinion of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein once again to prove a point. He says, the fact that the 10 had to retort that the conquest was impossible, that they had to restate their argument and fortify it, indicates that Caleb's statement impacted the Jewish nation, negating the skepticism of the 10 spies' initial declaration and causing the masses to sway, re-embracing God's promise, albeit for only fleeting moments. So herein lies the great worth of Caleb's deed. Jewish law dictates that a moment of physical life is so precious that even a brief extension of life justifies the desecration of the Sabbath. Similarly, affording one's fellow Jew an additional moment of spiritual life as a mentor, as a teacher, as a parent, as a friend, is a tremendous act, one worthy of such fantastic reward. I don't know if you understand what's going on here, because I think these words are amazing, in the sense that, let me go back to this text. Why were the other 10 spies that said, after Caleb's statement, said, we cannot attack that people, for it's stronger than we? Because people, for some reason, I wish sometimes we can put a voice to the characters of the Torah, but it looks that Caleb spoke to the people of Israel in such a tone that people started to say, hey, maybe these two guys are right after all. So in other words, the 10 spies freaked out that Caleb and Joshua started to talk to the people, and it looks like some of them started to believe them. So they did make an impact in some of them. So that's why the other 10 rushed to reinforce the negative report. But it says, but by the time that all the people bought again the arguments of the 10 spies, something changed within them. For a few minutes, they believed. For a few minutes, their faith was strengthened. And that's life also, right? So 1 minute our faith is strong, the next minute is not. But that's okay. But if you are in a position like Caleb was, to strengthen somebody else's faith, you should go for it. Even if you know that that person's faith is going to change tomorrow, doesn't matter. And I believe this has practical applications, that we all know people, for example, that they are not shul goers. They don't like to go to synagogue. So sometimes you may have an opportunity to convince somebody to come to synagogue with you for one Shabbat, one service, one simple service. But you may think, why should I bother inviting this person to synagogue if I know that this person will never come back? Doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter. Because for that service that you brought that person to shul, you are giving the person a chance to have a spiritual impact or a spiritual benefit for that single time. Even if tomorrow that person will never come back, at least you planted a seed that you will never know what impact it might have in the future. I know people that they actually came back to shul because they still remember that time that they came when they were young. And that back time, they never paid attention or never anything, but eventually, many years later, they remembered. And they remembered that experience. So if you have a chance to share a little bit of spirituality with somebody, go for it. Go for it. Even if, in theory, doesn't go anywhere. Because I believe there is always something that stays. Yeah. Denise, you said that actually happened for me. Oh, I would like to know that. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Debbie Pollack, what do you say? Is every Jew's job to influence other Jews with Torah knowledge and mitzvot? Every moment has huge potential. And I believe that in these days it's more than Jews, and everybody needs spirituality. I think Judaism has the power, if you might, the power to offer spirituality to Jews and non-Jews alike. And that doesn't mean that we are going to go around converting people. That's not the goal. That's not the goal. The goal is to discover or to help people understand. Don't worry. You're in the hands of the Creator. There is a master plan. And whenever you need something, God will be there for you. It's something that we're able to be light unto the nations. Yeah, Karen, light, but in the widest possible sense, light unto the nations. Sometimes we don't understand how important light is, because when you light a candle or you turn on the light, it benefits everybody around you. It's not just you. The entire room now is lit, and everybody, not just you, can see the obstacles and go around. I believe that's what one of the meanings of being light to the nations, to turn on such light that people can see the obstacles in front of them. Because I believe that's one of the problems living a life without faith, without spirituality. We don't have that light that would allow us to go around life's challenges and obstacles. So let's continue with the next text. It says, why the story of the spies occurs immediately after that of Miriam, for whom the nation waited while she was cured of the spiritual blemish of Tzaraat. Because she was afflicted by this blemish because of the same problem. Miriam was punished because she spoke badly of Moses' wife, and the Jewish people saw that the evil of gossip can hit even the most upstanding members of the community. These wicked men did not take the opportunity to learn ethics. Well, this is another thing that happened here. Yes, Debbie, you said Lashon Hara. This is because I wish we have time to go word by word on the report that they brought when they went to explore the land, and how they actually, it's almost like they gossiped about the land, twisting every piece of factual information that they brought. They were smart enough to mix facts with twisted interpretation to create a specific reaction on people. And I believe sometimes that was gossip does. I guess, you bring some piece of gossip to create sometimes animosity between two people, right? So, yeah. Rocky Pollack, what you said, let me read here. There's a core value must be to have respect for teachers because one needs leadership to understand. Okay? Interesting. To understand these complicated concepts. Okay. And Debbie, you said both the spies and Miriam spoke negatively. That's correct. That's correct. And it's almost that the Torah put the two together as a sense that, look, we already mentioned that it's almost like we cannot blame them because they didn't went to yeshiva, they never learned faith from books and so forth. But now they said they didn't even learn to avoid gossip from experience. They already saw what happened, what is the consequence of gossiping. They all saw what happened to Miriam, and nothing to do with miracles, but still they didn't learn that they should not do what they did. It's very interesting, because you can study Torah in a yeshiva, but you can also study Torah by experience. And as I always mention this, that we all want to increase our knowledge. We all want to get wisdom. But wisdom comes mainly two ways. And one is by mistakes. You gain wisdom by mistakes. You make a mistake, you learn the lesson, right? Sometimes. Because sometimes depends who you are, you may need to make a mistake multiple times before you learn the lesson. But that's why there is another way of learning that is faster than relying on mistakes until you learn the lesson, and is by getting a mentor. When you have a mentor, the mentor will share with you other people's mistakes. So you will learn from somebody else's mistakes. So you won't make the same mistake. And that is a way faster method to gain wisdom, by learning from somebody else's mistakes. So yeah, two ways. You can learn by mistakes, long and painful, or you can learn with mentors that they already learned or already researched and studied other people's mistakes, so it will guide you how to avoid those mistakes in your life. Yeah. Here, let's see. Karen, you said, but the spies were asked to report. So is that really gossip? Well, yes, because the spies supposed to report so they could create a strategy and then to see how it will be the best way to enter to the promised land. But that's not exactly what happened. They came back and they said, it's impossible. Well, that's not up to you to decide that it's impossible or not. That will be up to Moses and the generals and the army that they were relying. So basically Moses sent them and said, look around, take notes of everything that you see, bring it back, and then we will create a strategy. And we will find the best way to enter to the promised land. That eventually that's what happened. Of course, it happened 40 years later, but that's exactly what happened. They sent spies again. They saw what's going on. They reported back. They created a strategy, and they entered to the promised land. So it was not up to the spies to say yes or no. That was not their goal. That was not their mandate. That was not in their job description. All they had to do was to observe and report. That's it. But that's not exactly what they did. They took that extra time to give their opinion about the land with already the intention, the idea to convince the people to change their mind to go back to Egypt. And then, let's see. Denise, he said, could it be that the spies made it seem more ominous than it really was? Yeah, absolutely. Because they had a goal. They had an agenda. They want to change their people's mind. So they embellished everything so they could go back to Egypt. Yeah. So I have one more thing that I want to share with you about what happened with these people. Remember, I talked to you about how they were sometimes afraid to lose their honor and their position and all that. So I want to share this with you. This is from Mesilat Yesharim. Beautiful book if you can get it. It is possible that a person can overcome his inclination for money and other pleasures, yet still be pressed for honor, as he cannot tolerate being on a lower status than his friends. It was this which, according to our sages, caused the sin of the spies to slander the land and brought death upon them and the entire generation. For they feared lest their honor be diminished when they would enter the land, as they will no longer be princes among Israel, and others will serve in their stead. That's another reason on why these people wanted to go and why they slandered the land. Because so far they were pretty comfortable in the desert being the leaders of the tribes. Once they went to explore the land, and they realized that, well, that's not really the way people living in cities behave. They have other kind of ranks and other opportunities for other people to gain status. They got scared. They didn't want to lose their privilege. So they created a whole scheme to keep their status, even though that will mean that would mean that it will be a situation that is not the best for the people of Israel. So yeah. Okay, so that is the text that I wanted to share with you. So I would like to know what you think about that. Give me 1 minute, please, people. I'm in a class already. 5 minutes. Sorry, my son is here. He needs me for his class. This is the unintended consequences of remote learning. I also became an expert on where every paper is in this house, and it's a full-time job, it looks like. So thank you everyone for participating in today's class. It was great to have you all. And remember, we are going to meet again, God willing, next Thursday at the same time. Okay? And I'm going to try to restream this class tonight at 8 p.m. If you missed the part, or if you want to tell somebody else, I'm always trying to do it live and then stream it again, just in case if somebody missed it. So thank you again to everyone for being there. Thank you. I hope you will remember to subscribe to our channels, hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to our channels. Very important. And have a wonderful rest of your day, and hope to see you soon. Bye everyone. Have a wonderful day.